After a moment's silence, while everyone digested this humbling comment, Packard said, "Well, Bill, at least we didn't louse it up completely." 7. Shortly before his death, I had the opportunity to meet Dave Packard. Despite being one of Silicon Valley's first self-made billionaires, he lived in the same small house that he and his wife built for themselves in 1957, overlooking a simple orchard. The tiny kitchen, with its dated linoleum, and the simply furnished living room bespoke a man who needed no material symbols to proclaim, "I'm a billionaire. I'm important. I'm successful." His idea of a good time, said Bill Terry, who worked with Packard for 36 years, was to get some of his friends together to string some barbed wire. 8. Packard bequeathed his $5.6 billion estate to a charitable foundation, and, upon his death, his family created a eulogy pamphlet, with a photo of him sitting on a tractor, in farming clothes. The caption made no reference to his stature, as one of the great industrialists of the 20th century. 9. It simply read, David Packard, 1912-1996, rancher, etc. Level 5, indeed. Core ideology, the extra dimension of enduring greatness. During our interview with Bill Hewlett, we asked him what he was most proud of in his long career. "As I look back on my life's work," he said, "I'm probably most proud of having helped create a company that by virtue of its values, practices, and success has had a tremendous impact on the way companies are managed around the world." 10. The HP Way, as it became known, reflected a deeply held set of core values that distinguished the company more than any of its products. These values included technical contribution, respect for the individual, responsibility in 1984 in which the company operates, Great Western, and a deeply held belief that profit is not the fundamental goal of a company. Grew revenues and earnings only 25%, while fairly standard today, were radical and progressive in the 1950s. David Packard said of businessmen from those days, while they were reasonably polite in their disagreement, it was quite evident that they firmly believed that I was not one of them, and obviously not qualified to manage an important enterprise. 11. Hewlett and Packard exemplify a key, extra dimension that helped elevate their company to the elite status of an enduring great company, a vital dimension for making the transition from good to great to built to last. That extra dimension is a guiding philosophy, or a core ideology, which consists of core values and a core purpose, reason for being beyond just making money. These resemble the principles in the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, never perfectly followed, but always present as an inspiring standard and an answer to the question of why it is important that we exist. Enduring great companies don't exist merely to deliver returns to shareholders. Indeed, in a truly great company, profits and cash flow become like blood and water to a healthy body. They are absolutely essential for life, but they are not the very point of life. We wrote in Built to Last about Merck's decision to develop and distribute a drug that cured river blindness. This painful disease afflicted over 1 million people with parasitic worms that swarm through the eyes to cause blindness. Because those who had the disease, tribal people in remote places like the Amazon, had no money, Merck initiated the creation of an independent distribution system to get the drug to remote villages, and gave the drug away free to millions of people around the world. 12. To be clear, Merck is not a charity organization, nor does it view itself as such. Indeed, it has consistently outperformed the market as a highly profitable company, growing to nearly $6 billion in profits, and beating the market by over 10 times from 1946 to 2000. Yet, despite its remarkable financial performance, Merck does not view its ultimate reason for being as making money. In 1950, George Merck II-D, son of the founder, set forth his company's philosophy. "We try to remember that medicine is for the patient, it is not for the profits. The profits follow, and if we have remembered that, they have never failed to appear. The better we have remembered it, the larger they have been." 13. An important caveat to the concept of core values is that there are no specific, right, core values for becoming an enduring great company. No matter what core value you propose, we found an enduring great company that does not have that specific core value. A company need not have passion for its customers, Sony didn't, or respect for the individual, Disney didn't, or quality, Walmart didn't, or social responsibility, Ford didn't, in order to become enduring and great. This was one of the most paradoxical findings from Built to Last. Core values are essential for enduring greatness, but it doesn't seem to matter what those core values are. The point is not what is a central feature of enduring great companies. The obvious question is, how do you preserve the core and yet adapt to a changing world? The answer, embrace the key concept of preserve the core is stimulate progress. Enduring great companies preserve their core values and purpose while their business strategies and operating practices endlessly adapt to a changing world. This is the magical combination of preserve the core and stimulate progress. The story of Walt Disney exemplifies this duality. In 1923, an energetic 21-year-old animator moved from Kansas City to Los Angeles and tried to get a job in the movie business. No film company would hire him, so he used his meager savings to rent a camera, set up a studio in his uncle's garage, and begin making animated cartoons. In 1934, Mr. Disney took the bold step, never before taken, to create successful full-length animated feature films, including Snow White, Pinocchio, Fantasia, and Bambi. In the 1950s, Disney moved into television with the Mickey Mouse Club. Also in the 1950s, Walt Disney paid a fateful visit to a number of amusement parks and came away disgusted, calling them dirty, phony places, run by tough-looking people. 14 He decided that Disney could build something much better, perhaps even the best in the world, and the company launched a whole new business in theme parks, first with Disneyland and later with Walt Disney World and Epcot Center. Over time, Disney theme parks have become a cornerstone experience for many families from all over the world. Throughout all these dramatic changes, from cartoons to full-length feature animation, from the Mickey Mouse Club to Disney World, the company held firmly to a consistent set of core values that included passionate belief in creative imagination, fanatic attention to detail, abhorrence of cynicism, and preservation of the Disney magic. Mr. Disney also instilled a remarkable constancy of purpose that permeated every new Disney venture, namely, to bring happiness to millions, especially children. This purpose cut across national borders and has endured through time. When my wife and I visited Israel in 1995, we met the man who brought Disney products to the Middle East. The whole idea, he told us with pride, is to bring a smile to a child's face. That's really important here, where there aren't enough smiles on the children. Walt Disney provides a classic case of preserve the core and stimulate progress. Holding a core ideology fixed while changing strategies and practices over time, and its adherence to this principle, is the fundamental reason why it has endured as a great company. Good bags, bad bags, and other conceptual links. In the table on page 198, I've outlined a sketch of conceptual links between the two studies. As a general pattern, the good to great ideas appear to lay the groundwork for the ultimate success of the built to last ideas. I like to think of good to great as providing the core ideas for getting a flywheel turning from build-up through breakthrough, while built to last outlines the core ideas for keeping a flywheel accelerating long into the future and elevating a company to iconic stature. You will notice in examining the table that each of the good to great findings enables all four of the key ideas from built to last. To briefly review, those four key ideas are: 1. Clock building, not time telling. Build an organization that can endure and adapt through multiple generations of leaders and multiple product life cycles, the exact opposite of being built around a single great leader or a single great idea. 2. Genius of and. Embrace both extremes on a number of dimensions at the same time. Instead of choosing A or B, figure out how to have A and B, purpose and profit, continuity and change, freedom and responsibility, etc. 3. Core ideology. Instill core values, essential and enduring tenets, and core purpose, fundamental reason for being beyond just making money, as principles to guide decisions and inspire people throughout the organization over a long period of time. 4. Preserve the core, stimulate progress. Preserve the core ideology as an anchor point while stimulating change, improvement, innovation, and renewal in everything else. Change practices and strategies while holding core values and purpose fixed. Set and achieve BHAGs consistent with the core ideology. I am not going to bellabore all the links from the above table, but I would like to highlight one particularly powerful link: the connection between BHAGs and the three circles of the hedgehog concept. In Built to Last, we identified BHAGs as a key way to stimulate progress while preserving the core. A BHAG, pronounced BHAG, short for Big Hairy Audacious Goal, is a huge and daunting goal, like a big mountain to climb. It is clear, compelling, and people get it right away. A BHAG serves as a unifying focal point of effort, galvanizing people and creating team spirit as people strive toward a finish line. Like the 1960s NASA moon mission, a BHAG captures the imagination and grabs people in the gut. However, as exciting as BHAGs are, we left a vital question unanswered. What is the difference between a bad BHAG and a good BHAG? Swimming from Australia to New Zealand would be a BHAG for me, but it would also kill me. We can now offer an answer to that question, drawing directly from the study of good to great companies. Bad BHAGs, it turns out, are set with bravado. Good BHAGs are set with understanding. Indeed, when you combine quiet understanding of the three circles with the audacity of a BHAG, you get a powerful, almost magical mix. A superb example of this comes from Boeing in the 1950s. Until the early 1950s, Boeing focused on building huge flying machines for the military: the B-17 Flying Fortress, the B-29 Superfortress, and the B-52 Intercontinental. Intercontinental Jet Bomber Stratofortress. 15. However, Boeing had virtually no presence in the commercial aircraft market, and the airlines showed no interest in buying aircraft from Boeing. "You make great bombers up there in Seattle. Why don't you just stick with that?" they said in response to Boeing's inquiries. Today, we take for granted that most air travel takes place on Boeing jets, but in 1952, almost no one outside the military flew on Boeing. 16. Wisely, through the 1940s, Boeing had stayed away from the commercial sphere, an arena in which McDonnell Douglas had vastly superior abilities in the smaller, propeller-driven planes that composed the commercial fleet. 17. In the early 1950s, however, Boeing saw an opportunity to leapfrog McDonnell Douglas by marrying its experience with large aircraft to its understanding of jet engines. Led by a Level 5 leader named Bill Allen, Boeing executives debated the wisdom of moving into the commercial sphere. They came to understand that, whereas Boeing could not have been the best commercial plane maker a decade earlier, the cumulative experience in jets and big planes they had gained from military contracts now made such a dream possible. They also came to see that the economics of commercial aircraft would be vastly superior to the military market and, of no small importance, they were just flat out turned on by the whole idea of building a commercial jet. So, in 1952, Bill Allen and his team made the decision to spend a quarter of the company's entire net worth to build a prototype jet that could be used for commercial aviation. 18. They built the 707 and launched Boeing on a bid to become the leading commercial aviation company in the world. 3 decades later, after producing 5 of the most successful commercial jets in history, the 707, 727, 737, 747, and 757, Boeing stood as the absolute, unquestioned greatest company in the commercial airplane industry, worldwide. 19. Not until the late 1990s would Boeing's number 1 position be seriously challenged, and it would take a government consortium in the form of Airbus to do it. 20. Here is the key point: Boeing's BHAG, while huge and daunting, was not any random goal. It was a goal that made sense within the context of the 3 circles. Boeing's executives understood with calm equanimity that, 1, the company could become the best in the world at commercial jet manufacturing even though it had no presence in the market, 2, the shift would significantly improve Boeing's economics by increasing profit per aircraft model, and 3, the Boeing people were very passionate about the idea. Boeing acted with understanding, not bravado, at this pivotal moment in its history, and that is one of the key reasons why it endured as a great company. The Boeing case underscores a key point: to remain great over time requires, on the one hand, staying squarely within the 3 circles while, on the other hand, being willing to change the specific manifestation of what's inside the 3 circles at any given moment. Boeing in 1952 never left the 3 circles or abandoned its core ideology, but it created an exciting new BHAG and adjusted its hedgehog concept to include commercial aircraft. The 3-circle, the BHAG framework provides one powerful example of how the ideas from the 2 studies link together, and I'd like to offer it here as a practical tool for creating this link within your own organization. Yet it alone will not make your company great and lasting. To create an enduring great company requires all the key concepts from both studies, tied together and applied consistently over time. Furthermore, if you ever stop doing any one of the key ideas, your organization will inevitably slide backward toward mediocrity. Remember, it is much easier to become great than to remain great. Ultimately, the consistent application of both studies, one building upon the other, gives the best chance for creating greatness that lasts. Why greatness? During a break at a seminar that I gave to a group of my ex-students from Stanford, one came up to me, brow furrowed. "Maybe I'm just not ambitious enough," he said. "But I don't really want to build a huge company. Is there something wrong with that?" "Not at all," I replied. "Greatness doesn't depend on size." I then told him about Sina Samantov, who runs the building where I have my research laboratory. Sina has created a truly great institution. It's an old 1892 red brick school building that has been renovated into the most extraordinary space, decorated and maintained with tremendous attention to detail, bordering on perfection. By one definition of results, attracting the most interesting people in Boulder, setting a standard that other local buildings measure themselves against, and generating the highest profit per foot of space, his small enterprise is truly a great institution. Institution in my hometown. Samantov has never defined greatness by size, and there is no reason for him to. The student paused for a moment, then said, "Okay, I accept that I don't need to build a big company in order to have a great company. But even so, why should I try to build a great company? What if I just want to be successful?" The question brought me up short. This was not a lazy person asking. He'd started his own business as a young man, put himself through law school, and after graduate school became a driven entrepreneur. He has remarkable energy, an intense and infectious enthusiasm. Of all the students I've known over the years, he is one that I have little doubt will be enormously successful. Yet he questions the whole idea of trying to build something great and lasting. I can offer 2 answers. First, I believe that it is no harder to build something great than to build something good. It might be statistically more rare to reach greatness, but it does not require more suffering than perpetuating mediocrity. Indeed, if some of the comparison companies in our study are any indication, it involves less suffering and perhaps even less work. The beauty and power of the research findings is that they can radically simplify our lives while increasing our effectiveness. There is great solace in the simple fact of clarity about what is vital and what is not. Indeed, the point of this entire book is not that we should add these findings to what we are already doing and make ourselves even more overworked. No, the point is to realize that much of what we are doing is at best a waste of energy. If we organized the majority of our work time around applying these principles, and pretty much ignored or stopped doing everything else, our lives would be simpler and our results vastly improved. Let me illustrate this point with a non-business example, the last story of the book. The coaching staff of a high school cross-country running team recently got together for dinner after winning its second state championship in 2 years. The program had been transformed in the previous 5 years from good, top 20 in the state, to great, consistent contenders for the state championship, on both the boys and girls teams. I don't get it, said one of the coaches. Why are we so successful? We don't work any harder than other teams. And what we do is just so simple. Why does it work? He was referring to the hedgehog concept of the program, captured in the simple statement, we run best at the end. We run best at the end of workouts. We run best at the end of races. And we run best at the end of the season, when it counts the most. Everything is geared to this simple idea and the coaching staff knows how to create this effect better than any other team in the state. For example, they place a coach at the 2-mile mark of a 3.1-mile race to collect data as the runners go past. But unlike most teams, which collect time splits, minutes per mile running pace, this team collects place splits, what place the runners are in as they go by. Then the coaches calculate not how fast the runners go, but how many competitors they pass at the end of the race, from mile 2 to the finish. They then use this data to award head bones after each race. Head bones are beads in the shape of shrunken skulls, which the kids make into necklaces and bracelets, symbolizing their vanquished competitors. The kids learn how to pace themselves and race with confidence. We run best at the end, they think at the end of a hard race. So, if I'm hurting bad, then my competitors must hurt a whole lot worse. Of equal importance is what they don't waste energy on. For example, when the head coach took over the program, she found herself burdened with expectations to do fun programs and rah-rah stuff to motivate the kids and keep them interested, parties and special trips and shopping adventures to Nike outlets and inspirational speeches. She quickly put an end to nearly all that distracting and time-consuming activity. Look, she said, this program will be built on the idea that running is fun, racing is fun, improving is fun, and winning is fun. If you're not passionate about what we do here, then go find something else to do. The result, the number of kids in the program nearly tripled in 5 years, from 30 to 82. Before the boys' team won the first ever state cross-country championship in the school's history, she didn't explicitly set the goal, or try to motivate the kids toward it. Instead, she let the kids gain momentum, seeing for themselves, race by race, week by week, that they could beat anyone in the state. Then, one day out on a training run, one boy said to his teammates, hey, I think we could win state. Yeah, I think so, too, said another. Everyone kept running, the goal quietly understood. The coaching staff never once mentioned the state championship idea until the kids saw for themselves that they could do it. This created the strongest culture of discipline possible, as the 7 varsity runners felt personally responsible for winning state, a commitment made not to the coaches, but to each other. One team member even called all of his teammates the night before the state race, just to make sure they were all getting ready for bed early. No need for the coaches to be disciplinarians on this team. Hammering through the last mile, passing competitors, we run best at the end, each kid hurt, but knew it would hurt a lot more if he had to look his teammates in the eyes as the only one who failed to come through. No one failed, and the team beat every other team at the state meet by a large margin. The head coach began rebuilding the whole program around the idea of first who. One of the assistant coaches is a 300-pound ex-shot putter, hardly the image of a lean distance runner, but he is without question the right who. He shares the values and has the traits needed to help build a great team. As the program built momentum, it attracted more kids and more great coaches. People want to be part of the spinning flywheel. They want to be part of a championship team. They want to be part of a first-class culture. When the cross-country team posts yet another championship banner in the gym, more kids sign up, the gene pool deepens, the team gets faster, which produces more championships, which attracts more kids, which creates even faster teams, and so forth and so on in the infectious flywheel effect. Are these coaches suffering more than other teams to create a great program? Are they working harder? No. In fact, all the assistant coaches have full-time professional jobs outside of coaching, engineers, computer technicians, teachers, and they work for essentially no pay, carving precious time out of their busy lives to be part of building a great program. They are just focusing on the right things, and not the wrong things. They are doing virtually everything we write about in this book, within their specific situation, and not wasting time on anything that doesn't fit. Simple, clean, straightforward, elegant, and a heck of a lot of fun. The point of this story is that these ideas work. When you apply them in any situation, they make your life and your experience better, while improving results. And along the way, you just might make what you're building great. So, I ask again, if it's no harder, given these ideas, the results better, and the process so much more fun, well, why wouldn't you go for greatness? To be clear, I'm not suggesting that going from good to great is easy, or that every organization will successfully make the shift. By definition, it is not possible for everyone to be above average. But I'm asserting that those who strive to turn good into great find the process no more painful or exhausting than those who settle for just letting things wallow along in mind-numbing mediocrity. Yes, turning good into great takes energy, but the building of momentum adds more energy back into the pool than it takes out. Conversely, perpetuating mediocrity is an inherently depressing process and drains much more energy out of the pool than it puts back in. But there is a second answer to the question of why greatness, one that is at the very heart of what motivated us to undertake this huge project in the first place, the search for meaning, or more precisely, the search for meaningful work. I asked the head coach of the cross-country program why she felt compelled to make it great. She paused before answering. That's a really good question. Long pause. It's really hard to answer. More pause. I guess it's because I really care about what we're doing. I believe in running and the impact it can make on these kids' lives. I want them to have a great experience, and to have the experience of being part of something absolutely first class. Now for the interesting twist. The coach has an MBA from an elite business school and is a Phi Beta Kappa graduate in economics, having won the prize for the best undergraduate honors thesis at one of the most selective universities in the world. She found, however, that most of what her classmates went on to do, investment banking on Wall Street, starting internet companies, management consulting, working for IBM, or whatever, held no meaning for her. She just didn't care enough about those endeavors to want to make them great. For her, those jobs held no meaningful purpose. And so she made the decision to search for meaningful work about which she would have such passion that the question, why try for greatness, would seem almost tautological. If you're doing something you care that much about, and you believe in its purpose deeply enough, then it is impossible to imagine not trying to make it great. It's just a given. I've tried to imagine the level 5 leaders of the companies we've studied answering the question, why greatness? Of course, most would say, we're not great, we could be so much better. But pushed to answer, why try for greatness? I believe they would respond much like the cross-country coach. They're doing something they really care about which they have great passion. Like Bill Hewlett, they might care first and foremost about creating a company that by virtue of its values and success has a tremendous impact on the way companies are managed around the world. Or like Ken Iverson, they might feel a crusader's purpose to obliterate the oppressive class hierarchies that cause degradation of both labor and management. Or like Darwin Smith at Kimberly-Clark, they might derive a tremendous sense of purpose from the inner quest for excellence itself, being driven from within to make anything they touch the best it can be. Or perhaps like Lyle Everingham at Kroger or Cork Walgreen at Walgreens, they might have grown up in the business and just really love it. You don't need to have some grand existential reason for why you love what you're doing or to care deeply about your work, although you might. All that matters is that you do love it and that you do care. So, the question of why greatness is almost a nonsense question. If you're engaged in work that you love and care about, for whatever reason, then the question needs no answer. The question is not why, but how. Indeed, the real question is not why greatness, but what work makes you feel compelled to try to create greatness. If you have to ask the question, why should we try to make it great? Isn't success enough? Then you're probably engaged in the wrong line of work. Perhaps your quest to be part of building something great will not fall in your business life. But find it somewhere. If not in corporate life, then perhaps in making your church great. If not there, then perhaps a non-profit, or a community organization, or a class you teach. Get involved in something that you care so much about that you want to make it the greatest it can possibly be, not because of what you will get, but just because it can be done. When you do this, you will start to grow, inevitably, toward becoming a level 5 leader. Early in the book, we wondered about how to become level 5, and we suggested that you start by practicing the rest of the findings. But under what conditions will you have the drive and discipline to fully practice the other findings? Perhaps it is when you care deeply enough about the work in which you are engaged, and when your responsibilities line up with your own personal 3 circles. When all these pieces come together, not only does your work move toward greatness, but so does your life. For, in the end, it is impossible to have a great life unless it is a meaningful life. And it is very difficult to have a meaningful life without meaningful work. Perhaps, then, you might gain that rare tranquility that comes from knowing that you've had a hand in creating something of intrinsic excellence that makes a contribution. Indeed, you might even gain that deepest of all satisfactions, knowing that your short time here on this earth has been well spent, and that it mattered. Epilogue frequently asked questions. Question: did you originally identify more than 11 good to great possibilities? And if so, what good to great examples did not make it into the study? The 11 good to great companies were the only examples from our initial universe of Fortune 500 companies that met all the criteria for entrance into the study. They do not represent a sample. See Appendix 1.a for the selection process we used. The fact that we studied the total set of companies that met our criteria should increase our confidence in the findings. We do not need to worry that a second set of companies in the Fortune 500 went from good to great, not by our criteria, anyway, by other methods. Question: why did only 11 companies make the cut? There are 3 principal reasons. First, we used a very tough standard, 3 times the market over 15 years, as our metric of great results. Second, the 15-year sustainability requirement is difficult to meet. Many companies show a sharp rise for 5 or 10 years with a hit product or charismatic leader, but few companies manage to achieve 15 years. Third, we were looking for a very specific pattern, sustained great results preceded by a sustained period of average results, or worse. Great companies are easy to find, but good to great companies are much more rare. When you add all these factors together, it is not surprising that we identified only 11 examples. I would like to stress, however, that the only 11 finding should not be discouraging. We had to set a cutoff, and we chose a very tough one. If we had set a slightly lower hurdle, say, 2.5 times the market, or 10 years of sustainability, then many more companies would have qualified. After completing the research, I am convinced that many organizations can make the journey from good to great if they apply the lessons in this book. The problem is not the statistical odds. The problem is that people are squandering their time and resources on the wrong things. Question: what about statistical significance, given that only 11 companies made the final cut as good to great examples and the total study size is 28 companies with comparisons? We engaged 2 leading professors to help us resolve this question, 1 statistician and 1 applied mathematician. The statistician, Jeffrey T. Luftig at the University of Colorado, looked at our dilemma and concluded that we do not have a statistics problem, pointing out that the concept of statistical significance applies only when sampling of data is involved. Look, you didn't sample companies, he said. You did a very purposeful selection, and found the 11 companies from the Fortune 500 that met your criteria. When you put these 11 against the 17 comparison companies, the probabilities that the concepts in your framework appear by random chance are essentially 0. When we asked University of Colorado Applied Mathematics Professor William P. Briggs to examine our research method, he framed the question thus: what is the probability of finding by chance a group of 11 companies, all of whose members display the primary traits you discovered while the direct comparisons do not possess those traits? He concluded that the probability is less than 1 in 17 million. There is virtually no chance that we simply found 11 random events that just happened to show the good to great pattern we were looking for. We can conclude with confidence that the traits we found are strongly associated with transformations from good to great. Question: why did you limit your research to publicly traded corporations? Publicly traded corporations have 2 advantages for research: a widely agreed upon definition of results, so we can rigorously select a study set, and a plethora of easily accessible data. Privately held corporations have limited information available, which would be particularly problematic with comparison companies. The beauty of publicly traded companies is that we don't need their cooperation to obtain data. Whether they like it or not, vast amounts of information about them are a matter of public record. Question: why did you limit your research to US corporations? We concluded that rigor in selection outweighed the benefits of an international study set. The absence of apples-to-apples stock return data from non-US exchanges would undermine the consistency of our selection process. The comparative research process eliminates contextual noise, similar companies, industries, sizes, ages, and so forth, and gives us much greater confidence in the fundamental nature of our findings than having a geographically diverse study set. Nonetheless, I suspect that our findings will prove useful across geographies. A number of the companies in our study are global enterprises and the same concepts applied wherever they did business. Also, I believe that much of what we found, level 5 leadership and the flywheel, for instance, will be harder to swallow for Americans than for people from other cultures. Question: why don't any high technology companies appear in the study set? Most technology companies were eliminated from consideration because they are not old enough to show the good to great pattern. We required at least 30 years of history to consider a company for the study, 15 years of good results followed by 15 years of great results. Of the technology companies that did have more than 30 years of history, none showed the specific good to great pattern we were looking for. Intel, for example, never had a 15-year period of only good performance. Intel has always been great. If this study were to be repeated in 10 or 20 years, I would fully expect that high technology companies would make the list. Question: how does good to great apply to companies that are already great? I suggest that they use both good to great and built to last to help them better understand why they are great, so that they can keep doing the right things. As Robert Bergelman, one of my favorite professors from Stanford Business School, taught me years ago, the single biggest danger in business and life, other than outright failure, is to be successful without being resolutely clear about why you are successful in the first place. Question: how do you explain recent difficulties at some of the good to great companies? Every company, no matter how great, faces difficult times. There are no enduring great companies that have a perfect, unblemished record. They all have ups and downs. The critical factor is not the absence of difficulty, but the ability to bounce back and emerge stronger. Furthermore, if any company ceases to practice all of the findings, it will eventually slide backward. It is not any one variable in isolation that makes a company great. It is a combination of all of the pieces working together in an integrated package consistently and over time. Two current cases illustrate this point. One current case for concern is Gillette, which produced 18 years of exceptional performance, rising to over 9 times the market from 1980 to 1998, but stumbled in 1999. We believe the principal source of this difficulty lies in Gillette's need for greater discipline in sticking to businesses that fit squarely inside the three circles of its hedgehog concept. Of even greater concern is the clamoring from industry analysts that Gillette needs a charismatic CEO from outside the company to come in and shake things up. If Gillette brings in a level 4 leader, then the probability that Gillette will prove to be an enduring great company will diminish considerably. Another troubling case is Nuka, which hit its peak in 1994 at 14 times the market, then fell off considerably as it experienced management turmoil in the wake of Ken Iverson's retirement. Iverson's chosen successor lasted only a short time in the job, before being ousted in an ugly executive suite battle. One of the architects of this boardroom coup indicated in the Charlotte News and Observer, June 11, 1999, page D1, that Iverson had fallen from level 5 leadership in his old age, and had begun to display more egocentric level 4 traits. In his heyday, Ken was a giant of a man, he said, but he wanted to take this company to the grave with him. Iverson tells a different story, arguing that the real problem is current management's desire to diversify Nuka away from its hedgehog concept. Iverson just shakes his head, wrote the News and Observer, saying it was to get away from diversification that Nuka became a narrowly focused steel products company in the first place. Whatever the case, loss of level 5 leadership, or straying from the hedgehog concept, or both, the future of Nuka as a great company remains uncertain at the time of this writing. That being said, it is worth noting that most of the good to great companies are still going strong at the time of this writing. 7 of the 11 companies have thus far generated over 20 years of extraordinary performance from their transition dates, with the median of the entire group being 24 years of exceptional results, a remarkable record by any measure. Question: how do you reconcile Philip Morris as a great company with the fact that it sells tobacco? Perhaps no company anywhere generates as much antipathy as Philip Morris. Even if a tobacco company can be considered truly great, and many would dispute that, there is doubt as to whether any tobacco company can endure, given the ever-growing threat of litigation and social sanction. Ironically, Philip Morris has the longest track record of exceptional performance from the date of its transition, 34 years, and is the only company that made it into both studies, good to great and built to last. This performance is not just a function of being in an industry with high-margin products sold to addicted customers. Philip Morris blew away all the other cigarette companies, including its direct comparison, R.J. Reynolds. But for Philip Morris to have a viable future will require confronting square on the brutal facts about society's relationship to tobacco and the social perception of the tobacco industry. A large percentage of the public believes that every member of the industry participated equally in a systematic effort to deceive. Fair or not, people, especially in the United States, can forgive a lot of sins, but will never forget or forgive feeling lied to. Whatever one's personal feelings about the tobacco industry, and there was a wide range of feelings on the research team, and some very heated debates, having Philip Morris in both good to great and built to last has proved very instructive. It has taught me that it is not the content of a company's values that correlates with performance, but the strength of conviction with which it holds those values, whatever they might be. This is one of those findings that I find difficult to swallow, but that are completely supported by the data. For further discussion of this topic, see Chapter 3 of Built to Last, pages 65 to 71. Question: can a company have a hedgehog concept and have a highly diverse business portfolio? Our study strongly suggests that highly diversified firms and conglomerates will rarely produce sustained great results. One obvious exception to this is GE, but we can explain this case by suggesting that GE has a very unusual and subtle hedgehog concept that unifies its agglomeration of enterprises. What can GE do better than any company in the world? Develop first-rate general managers. In our view, that is the essence of GE's hedgehog concept. And what would be GE's economic denominator? Profit per top quartile management talent. Think about it this way, you have two business opportunities, both that might generate $X million in profits. But suppose one of those businesses would drain 3 times the amount of top quartile management talent to achieve those profits as the other business. The one that drains less management talent would fit with the hedgehog concept and the other would not. Finally, what does GE pride itself on more than anything else? Having the best set of general managers in the world. This is their true passion, more than light bulbs, jet engines, or television programming. GE's hedgehog concept, properly conceived, enables the company to operate in a diverse set of businesses yet remain squarely focused on the intersection of the 3 circles. Question: what is the role of the board of directors in a transformation from good to great? First, boards play a key role in picking level 5 leaders. The recent spate of boards enamored with charismatic CEOs, especially rockstar, celebrity types, is one of the most damaging trends for the long-term health of companies. Boards should familiarize themselves with the characteristics of level 5 leadership and install such leaders into positions of responsibility. Second, boards at corporations should distinguish between share value and share price. Boards have no responsibility to a large chunk of the people who own company shares at any given moment, namely the share flippers. They should refocus their energies on creating great companies that build value for the shareholders. Managing the stock for anything less than a 5 to 10 year horizon confuses price and value and is irresponsible to shareholders. For a superb look at the board's role in taking a company from good to great, I recommend the book Resisting Hostile Takeovers by Rita Ricardo Campbell, Prager Publishers. 1997, Ms. Ricardo Campbell was a Gillette board member during the Coleman-Mockler era and provides a detailed account of how a responsible board wrestled with the difficult and complex question of price versus value. Question: Can hot young technology companies in a go-go world have level 5 leaders? My answer is 2 words: John Morgridge. Mr. Morgridge was the transition CEO who turned a small, struggling company in the Bay Area into one of the great technology companies of the last decade. With the flywheel turning, this unassuming and relatively unknown man stepped into the background and turned the company over to the next generation of leadership. I doubt you've ever heard of John Morgridge, but I suspect you've heard of the company. It goes by the name Cisco Systems. Question: How can you practice the discipline of first who when there is a shortage of outstanding people? First, at the top levels of your organization, you absolutely must have the discipline not to hire until you find the right people. The single most harmful step you can take in a journey from good to great is to put the wrong people in key positions. Second, widen your definition of right people to focus more on the character attributes of the person and less on specialized knowledge. People can learn skills and acquire knowledge, but they cannot learn the essential character traits that make them right for your organization. Third, and this is key, take advantage of difficult economic times to hire great people, even if you don't have a specific job in mind. A year before I wrote these words, nearly everyone bemoaned the difficulty of attracting top talent away from hot technology and internet companies. Now the bubble has burst, and tens of thousands of talented people have been cast into the streets. Level 5 leaders will view this as the single best opportunity to come along in 2 decades, not a market or technology opportunity, but a people opportunity. They will take advantage of this moment and hire as many of the very best people they can afford and then figure out what they are going to do with them. Question: How can you practice the discipline of the right people on the bus and the wrong people off the bus in situations where it is very hard to get the wrong people off the bus, such as academic institutions and government agencies? The same basic idea applies, but it takes more time to accomplish. A prominent medical school, for example, went through a transformation from good to great in the 1960s and 1970s. The director of academic medicine changed the entire faculty, but it took him 2 decades. He could not fire tenured professors, but he could hire the right people for every opening, gradually creating an environment where the wrong people felt increasingly uncomfortable and eventually retired, or decided to go elsewhere. Also, you can use the council mechanism to your advantage. See Chapter 5. Fill council seats entirely with the right people, and just ignore the others. Yes, you might still have to carry the wrong people along, but you can essentially restrict them to backseats on the bus by not including them on the council. Question: I'm an entrepreneur running a small company. How do these ideas apply to me? Directly. See Chapter 9, where I discuss the application of the good to great ideas in the context of small and early stage companies. Question: I'm not a CEO. What can I do with these findings? Plenty. The best answer I can give is to reread the story at the end of Chapter 9 about the high school cross-country coach. Question: Where and how should I begin? First, familiarize yourself with all the findings. Remember, no single finding by itself makes a great organization. You need to have them all working together as an integrated set. Then work sequentially through the framework, starting with first who and moving through all the major components. Meanwhile, work continuously on your own development toward level 5 leadership. I have laid out this book in a sequence consistent with what we observed in the companies. The very structure of the book is a roadmap. I wish you the best of luck on your journey from good to great. Appendix 1. A selection process for good to great companies. Research team member Peter Van Genderen was instrumental in the creation of the selection criteria and in the death march of financial analysis, required to use the criteria to find the good to great companies. Criteria for selection as a good to great company. 1. The company shows a pattern of good performance punctuated by a transition point, after which it shifts to great performance. We define great performance as a cumulative total stock return of at least 3 times the general market for the period from the point of transition through 15 years, T plus 15. We define good performance as a cumulative total stock return no better than 1.25 times the general stock market for the 15 years prior to the point of transition. Additionally, the ratio of the cumulative stock return for the 15 years after the point of transition divided by the ratio of the cumulative stock return for the 15 years prior to the point of transition must exceed 3. 2. The good to great performance pattern must be a company shift, not an industry event. In other words, the company must demonstrate the pattern not only relative to the market, but also relative to its industry. 3. At the transition point, the company must have been an established, ongoing company, not a startup. This was defined as having operations for at least 25 years prior to the transition point. Additionally, it had to have been publicly traded with stock return data available at least 10 years prior to the transition point. 4. The transition point had to occur before 1985, so that we would have enough data to assess the sustainability of the transition. Good to great transitions that occurred after 1985 might have been good to great shifts. However, by the time we completed our research, we would be unable to calculate their 15-year ratio of cumulative returns to the general market. 5. Whatever the year of transition, the company still had to be a significant, ongoing, standalone company at the time of selection into the next stage of the research study. To satisfy this criterion, the company had to appear in the 1995 Fortune 500 rankings, published in 1996. 6. Finally, at the time of selection, the company should still show an upward trend. For any company where T plus 15 falls before 1996, the slope of cumulative stock returns relative to the market from the initial point of transition to 1996 should equal or exceed the slope of 3/15 required to satisfy criterion 1 for the T plus 15 phase. Good to great selection process. We used a sifting process with increasingly tighter screens to find our companies. The sifting process had 4 layers of analysis. Cut 1. From the universe of companies to 1,435 companies. We elected to begin our search with a list of companies that appeared on the Fortune rankings of America's largest public companies, going as far back as 1965, when the list came into existence. Our initial list consisted of all companies that appeared on the 1965, 1975, 1985, and 1995 listings. There were 1,435 such companies. Most people know these rankings as the Fortune 500, although the total number of companies listed may be as many as 1,000, because Fortune occasionally changes the size and format of its lists. As a base set to begin our analysis, the Fortune largest companies ranking has 2 key advantages. First, it lists only companies of substantial size. Companies earn their way onto the list by annual revenues. Therefore, nearly every company in the Fortune ranking met our criterion of being an established ongoing company at the time of transition. Second, all companies in the Fortune rankings are publicly traded, which allowed us to use financial stock return data as the basis for more rigorous screening and analysis. Privately held companies, which do not have to meet the same accounting and disclosure standards, offer no opportunity for an apples-to-apples, direct comparison analysis of performance. Restricting our set to the Fortune rankings has one obvious disadvantage. It limits our analysis to US-based companies. We concluded, however, that greater rigor in the selection process, made possible by using only publicly traded US firms that hold to a common reporting standard, apples-to-apples stock return data, outweighed the benefits of an international dataset. Cut 2, from 1,435 companies to 126 companies. Our next step was to use data from the University of Chicago Center for Research in Security Prices, CRSP, to make our final selection of good to great companies. We needed, however, a method to pare down the number of companies to a manageable size. We used the published Fortune rates of return data to reduce the candidate list. Fortune calculates the 10-year return to investors for each company in the rankings back to 1965. Using this data, we reduced the number of companies from 1,435 to 126. We screened for companies that showed substantially above average returns in the time spans of 1985 to 1995, 1975 to 1995, and 1965 to 1995. We also looked for companies that showed a pattern of above average returns preceded by average or below average returns. More specifically, the 126 companies selected passed any one of the following tests. Test 1. The compound annual total return to investors over the period 1985-1995 exceeded the compound annual average return to investors for the Fortune industrial and service listings over the same period by 30%, i.e., total returns exceeded average returns by 1.3 times, and the company showed evidence of average or below average performance in the prior 2 decades, 1965 to 1985. Test 2. The compound annual total return to investors over the period 1975-1995 exceeded the compound annual average return to investors for the Fortune industrial and service listings over the same period by 30%, i.e., total returns exceeded average returns by 1.3 times, and the company showed evidence of average or below average performance in the prior decade, 1965-1975. Test 3. The compound annual total return to investors over the period 1965-1995 exceeded the compound annual average return to investors for the Fortune industrial and service listings over the same period by 30%, i.e., total returns exceeded average returns by 1.3 times. The Fortune listings do not contain 10-year returns before 1965, so we decided to include all top performers over the 3-decade period in the initial set. Test 4. Companies founded after 1970 and whose total return to investors over the period 1985 to 1995 or 1975 to 1995 exceeded the average return to investors for the Fortune industrial and service listings over the same period by 30%, i.e., total returns exceeded average returns by 1.3 times, but that did not meet the above criteria due to a lack of data in the Fortune list in prior decades. This allowed us to closely consider any companies that performed well in later decades, but did not show up earlier on the Fortune listings. The 1970 cutoff also allowed us to identify and eliminate from consideration any companies with histories too short to be a legitimate transition company. Cut 3, from 126 companies to 19 companies. Drawing upon the research database at the University of Chicago Center for Research in Securities Pricing, CRSP, we analyzed the cumulative stock returns of each candidate company relative to the general market, looking for the good to great stock return pattern. Any company that met any one of the Cut 3 elimination criteria was eliminated at this stage. Cut 3 elimination criteria. Any company that met any one of the following elimination criteria was eliminated at this stage. Terminology used in Cut 3 elimination criteria. T-year, year we identified as the point at which performance began an upward trend, the transition year, based on when the actual stock returns showed a visible upward shift. X period, era of observable good performance relative to the market immediately prior to the T-year. Y period, era of substantially above market performance immediately following the T-year. Cut 3 elimination criterion number 1, the company displays a continual upward trend relative to the market over the entire time covered by CRSP data. There is no X period. Cut 3 elimination criterion number 2, the company shows a flat to gradual rise relative to the market. There is no obvious shift to breakthrough performance. Cut 3 elimination criterion number 3, the company demonstrates a transition, but an X period of less than 10 years. In other words, the pre-transition average performance data was not long enough to demonstrate a fundamental transition. In some cases, the company likely had more years of X period performance prior to the transition year, but the stock became traded on the Nasdaq, NYSE, or Amex during the X period. Therefore, our data did not go back far enough to verify an X period. Cut 3 elimination criterion number 4, the company demonstrates a transition from terrible performance to average performance relative to the market. In other words, we eliminated classic turnaround situations where the company pulled out of a downward trend and into a trajectory parallel with the general market. Cut 3 elimination criterion number 5, the company demonstrates a transition, but after 1985. Good to great transitions that occurred after 1985 might also have been legitimate good to great candidates. By the time we completed our research, however, we would not be able to verify that their 15-year ratio of cumulative returns to the general market met the 3-to-1 criterion. Cut 3 elimination criterion number 6, the company shows a transition to increased performance, but the rise in performance is not sustained. After the initial rise, it goes flat, or declines relative to the market, until the time of consideration for selection into the study. Cut 3 elimination criterion number 7, the company demonstrates a volatile pattern of returns, large upward and downward swings, with no clear X period, Y period, or T year. Cut 3 elimination criterion number 8, a complete set of CRSP data is not available before 1975, making it impossible to identify a verifiable X period of 10 years. Cut 3 elimination criterion number 9, there is a transition pattern, but the company demonstrated a period of such spectacular performance prior to the X period that there is substantial evidence that the company is a great company that had fallen temporarily on difficult times, rather than a good or mediocre company that became great. The classic example is Walt Disney. Cut 3 elimination criterion number 10, the company is acquired, has merged, or is otherwise eliminated from consideration as a standalone company by the time of the final Cut 3 analysis. Cut 3 elimination criterion number 11, the company shows a mild transition, but falls short of 3 times the market. Cut 4, from 19 companies to 11 good to great companies. We wanted to find companies that made a transition, not industries that made a transition. Merely being in the right industry at the right time would not qualify a company for the study. To separate industry transitions from company transitions, we decided to repeat the CRSP analysis for the remaining 19 companies, only this time against a composite industry index rather than the general stock market. Companies that showed a transition relative to their industry would be selected for the final study set. For each of the remaining 19 companies, we looked back in time via the S&P industry composites and created an industry set of companies at the time of transition within 5 years. We then acquired CRSP stock return data on all of the companies in the industry composite. If the company had multiple industry lines of business, we used 2 separate industry tests. We then created an industry cumulative returns index against which we plotted the cumulative returns for the transition company. This allowed us to identify and eliminate from the study any companies that did not show the transition pattern relative to their industry. Through industry analysis, we eliminated 8 companies. Sarli, Heinz, Hershey, Kellogg, CPC, and General Mills demonstrated a dramatic upward shift relative to the general stock market in about 1980, but none of these companies demonstrated a shift relative to the food industry. Coca-Cola and PepsiCo demonstrated a dramatic upward shift relative to the general stock market in about 1960 and again in 1980, but neither demonstrated a shift relative to the beverage industry. We therefore ended up with 11 companies that made it through cuts 1 through 4 and into the research study. Note, at the time of initial selection into the study, 3 of the companies did not yet have a full 15 years of cumulative stock data: Circuit City, Fannie Mae, and Wells Fargo. We continued to monitor the data until they hit T+15 years to ensure that they would meet the 3 times the market over 15 years standard of performance. All 3 did and remained in the study. Appendix 1.B Direct Comparison Selections. Direct Comparison Selection Process. The purpose of the direct comparison analysis is to create as close to a historical controlled experiment as possible. The idea is simple. By finding companies that were approximately the same ages and had similar opportunities, lines of business, and success profiles as each of the good to great companies at the time of transition, we were able to conduct direct comparative analysis in our research, looking for the distinguishing variables that account for the transition from good to great. Our objective was to find companies that could have done what the good to great companies did, but failed to do so, and then ask, what was different? We performed a systematic and methodical collection and scoring of all obvious comparison candidates for each good to great company, using the following 6 criteria. Business fit. At the time of transition, the comparison candidate had similar products and services as the good to great company. Size fit. At the time of transition, the comparison candidate was the same basic size as the good to great company. We applied a consistent scoring matrix based upon the ratio of the comparison candidate revenues divided by the good to great company revenues at the time of transition. Age fit. The comparison candidate was founded in the same era as the good to great company. We applied a consistent scoring matrix based upon a calculated age ratio of the comparison candidate to the good to great company. Stock chart fit. The cumulative stock returns to market chart of the comparison candidate roughly tracks the pattern of the good to great company until the point of transition, at which point the trajectories of the 2 companies separate, with the good to great company outperforming the comparison candidate from that point on. Conservative test. At the time of transition, the comparison candidate was more successful than the good to great company, larger and more profitable, with a stronger market position and better reputation. This is a critical test, stacking the deck against our good to great companies. Face validity. This takes into account 2 factors. 1, the comparison candidate